Welcome to the Contributive Citizenship podcast. My name is Nell and I'm your host. We're journeying through the life and times of Mpomakwana and what it means to be a citizen who understands self-mastery, their impact, and what has a good foundation for contributing towards society. Throughout the series, Ntate Makwana has shared generously about his life, his journeys, and what he believes in deeply around contributive citizenship. But ultimately, it's one that we should all learn from. Welcome to the Contributive Citizenship Podcast. Good afternoon, Tate Makwana.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good, and thanks. And you?
We have been on quite a journey over these past few episodes and have learned so much. And I think for me, it's also understanding our impact on society and what we contribute towards it. A few weeks ago, you shared an article on LinkedIn titled Crafting an Executive Portfolio Life, Purposeful Retirement versus Retirement. You wrote about purposeful leadership and, living life across various portfolios. But in keeping with the theme of contributive citizenship, what was the conviction behind you writing the article?
Well, it's not so much conviction as perhaps contribution. I get a number of my colleagues, some slightly older than me, I suppose, who reached that stage where they need to step off the platter of formal corporate life. And I don't think it just applies to corporate life. You could also be a retired social worker, you could be a retired teacher, you could be a retired nurse. The notion of retire, as in the traditional spelling of retirement, versus a concept that emerged. It's not in the English language, but it's a concept that leadership commentators invented probably in the last decade and a half or so, is that it's like putting on new tires. So you retire, so you repurpose for life after work. And generally what you find is that most people, for a good 2 decades, some 3 decades, some even longer, would have, especially baby boomers, would have gone through a journey where they just started working and that was all you could do, find a large organization to work for. And generally, even some Gen Xer friends of mine, 2 friends of mine turned 60 recently, and they were relating to how all they ever did was just thinking about how do I get to the office by 6:30 and leave the office probably just around 7, 8.
Sure.
Which is the typical challenge of an average busy executive life. And so in the process, you lose out on a number of things. You miss out. So if you look at the personal space, there's this idea of somebody published a model years ago called the Wheel of Life, that you need to constantly be almost doing, you draw the wheel and you will see that one dimension will have personal finances, family, friends, all the things that should matter to people in their personal space, health, wellness, wealth. And so often people, create an imbalance by purely pursuing the singular goal of making money. And so you find that you're a successful C-suite executive, whatever specialist, you're a successful CFO, chief human resource officer, chief marketing officer, and this and that, or even successful CEO, but you don't get to achieve other important things in life. You find that maybe in the 30 to 40 years, you've gone through 2, 3 divorces. So, which means you compromised your role as a life partner, as a meaningful life partner. You perhaps end up in the parenting space being an absent father, mother, because again, you've missed out all the important sporting events for your children, all the important dance, or if you've got a daughter or someone doing
Yes.
dancing or whatever sporting activity and extramural activity, you've missed them. And so the partner that was a bit more anchored filled in for you, attended all these important events, and now you are a mother, father who's got a strained relationship with your children. You also find that you become isolated because you did not have a sense of community. You did not invest time in building whatever community means.
Yeah.
And often your work becomes your community. And perhaps at a stretch, business associations and professional associations become an extension of your community. But in terms of physical community of where you grew up, or physical community of where you live, or physical community of whatever forms of association, social, political, you've isolated yourself. You then find that even sometimes spiritually, you get instance where someone has been, head down, focusing on making lots and lots of zeros at the end of the paycheck and climbing the ladder. And the only time they remember some semblance of spirituality is when they're either on their deathbed, or they're in hospital,
faced with the crisis,
and they say, well, please call me my priest. And so pastor, priest, reverend, whoever comes, dressed in whatever cloaks that they dress in as they preach the word, coming to offer you spiritual counseling at the tail end of your life. So you've missed a whole host of years of living life with meaning. And maybe only in the economic box, you've had a good work economy perspective, but you've missed out on a whole host of things. And maybe in the seventh perspective of lifelong learning, here and there, you relied on corporate-sponsored executive development programs. Perhaps you didn't even invest in things that you were passionate in academically. So some people get to perhaps be fortunate to have those many years of corporate life and have steadfast partners that would have stuck by them through thick and thin, and kept perhaps the home flames burning.
Yes.
And they then only at that point get to retire, to repurpose themselves along those 7 perspectives of living a purposeful life. So the notion of a portfolio life then comes in where people then start saying, well, what can I do? And often the key word there is plow back.
Correct.
What can I then do to plow back to certain aspects of my life? You'll then find someone saying, no, I spend every weekend at a kitchen soup, feeding the homeless, or I spend every weekend at a hospice, taking care of the terminally ill. All these are perhaps to some extent, going to sound harsh, but perhaps conscience cleansing. But
preparing for the afterlife.
You need to try and prevent yourself from finding that post facto. You have to say, what is it that I'm doing for good? So if you start early, in fact, the model that I cited in the LinkedIn says how to find balance in your life and your portfolio after 50. So perhaps if we all strove to ensure that around 50th birthday, people tend to throw big 50th birthday parties, perhaps that's the time to then set something up, a small, modest foundation, a small, modest platform that allows you to reconnect early with other things that matter in life. Money is important. You can't even move from point A to point B without money. If you need petrol, you need money.
Correct.
You need a bottle of milk and bread and butter, you need money. But we need to remember that lately I hear more and more people in employment, in areas of employment, saying family first. But too few people say personal wellness first.
Sure.
Parenting first. So it's those kind of challenges. Now, certain generations, Gen Xers and Gen Ys, are likely to actually live and work in a portfolio environment earlier in life than their baby boomer elders.
Why do you think that is, Ntate Makwana?
Because firstly, if you look at the average Gen Xer, especially those born in the tail end of the Gen X curve, between, say, 1979 and 19, probably 89, 85, let's say. Because the Gen Y starts around 84, 85. Yeah. So let's say around up to about 1981. So the average 45-year-old now in today's time, the average 40-year-old in today's time, would have had technology play a significant part in their career. They would have had a scenario where they go to work and in the evening they have a hobby. They have, some people use the word hustle, but we don't want to go there. But they are likely to have been driven by multi-interests. Gen Ys, on the other hand, people born post-19, from 81 onwards, tend to have been a generation, in some instances, even the latter part of Gen X between 1975 and 1980. They grew up in an environment where divorce was becoming a norm, an acceptable norm. And so they grew up with multiple loyalty. And so today, as working adults, they are not likely, all manner of research points in this direction, they are not likely to stay in jobs for decades. They are likely to move every 5 years. And in the process of moving frequently, they would also look at multiple interests that keep them engaged. It is also generally indicated in cross-generational research that the cohort of Gen Xers between 1978 and 80, followed then by their siblings born from 81 until about 99-ish, they would have been at school. Because remember, up to the Gen X generation, at school they did something called guidance. But Gen Ys, 81 and beyond, in South Africa, there would have been people that someone born in 1978 would have been exposed to a Model C, as it was called, primary education.
Yes.
And as the education system was changing, that changed from guidance to life orientation. And so because of that sense of life orientation, their outlook to life has shifted, has changed. And therefore, they are likely to be more socially conscious in the ESG sense of socially conscious. Whereas the earlier Gen Xers and baby boomers that grew under apartheid, or those that grew up towards the end of apartheid, as apartheid was fading out, consciousness then was largely political. And so the sense of doing something outside of work would have been largely community work and political work.
Okay.
Whereas post that, yes, there'll be those that would have been exposed to politics, today's politics in a human rights environment, in a society that is striving for inclusivity while grappling with issues of poverty, the dynamics will be slightly different, and hence a greater consciousness towards social development and SDGs. I mean, maybe if I turn the mic on you, what's your sense generationally of how you see this playing out? Is it far-fetched that from your generation you would see people being more socially conscious in their activism, more interested in environment rather than joining a political party, for instance? What would you say?
I think you're 100% correct, Ntate Makwada, but I also realize that because of the diversity and the country that we live in, you have more options. So there's a polarity in what you want to engage with, especially from a civil society standpoint. With my generation, I definitely see that pull towards environmentalism, gender matters, civil society, civic organizations. But over the past few years, there's definitely been an upsurge in political activism, and not necessarily within the ambit of wanting to lead, but to make sure that everyone is participating in the political sphere.
Yeah.
So in many ways, there is an intergenerational interplay, but the sectors and the diversity of different options are also there.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Remember in the Egypt and Arab communities, the Gen Ys gave us the name Arab Spring.
Correct, yes.
In South Africa, during the tenure of President Zuma, young people then emerged with the movement of fees must fall. So education, access to education activism triggered a new political movement. Today we've got NSFAS and other funding institutions as a result of that. But you can see that fees must fall movement did not sustain. Once the state responded with a model, it then quietened down.
Yeah.
But if you look at the earlier struggles of education, the 76 riots of rebelling against Afrikaans, the 1986 generation, because it was still intertwined with putting a system down, an evil system of apartheid, it was not just topical around education. It was about education and other related social challenges, political challenges. I think today I see a dilemma for anybody wanting to make a contribution, that you almost don't have an umbrella. You have to choose within various segmented niches of issues.
Of where you want to contribute.
Yeah, and what perhaps appeals to you.
Uh-huh.
It is only generally when people start having families, for instance, that whatever that was, let's call it a pet subject for them as a single person, suddenly you see the world differently when you now have to care for others. And you're likely to be interested in civil issues,
okay,
in terms of, do I have potholes in my community? Do I have water, electricity in my flat? Because now you've taken on a different identity. And so back to the issue of a portfolio life for the retiring or those exiting formal roles in the economy, there's room for intergenerational mentorship. But I think one has to be clear, though, that I get so many calls, people, will you mentor me? But there's mentorship and there's mentorship. Sometimes you may find that you have what people call virtual mentorship. So mentorship being a mentee by observation.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people. The other day, my son was graduating with his postgrad, and someone walked to me and said, thank you, I just wanted to shake your hand. I'm following your channel on YouTube, and I'm graduating later with a Gordon Institute of Business Science master's MBA, and I did strategy as an area of passion. And gee, your talks helped me. even though I didn't meet you, but just listening to you, I felt like I was being mentored in a certain direction.
Yes.
So there is that form of mentorship or being mentored by emulation. But when it comes to a professionalized mentoring and coaching role, this is where you would have someone who's a former CEO being approached by someone who's an aspirant CEO saying, my career path is pointing me in that direction. Can I enter into a formal executive coaching role? Or I'm a newly appointed chief executive. I'm a first-time chair of a board. Can I have you handhold me a little bit as I figure out my new universe? So people can contribute in that way, but the other people that make contribution in an executive portfolio space are those that perhaps retired comfortably, which is a relative term. Maybe they had, share incentive schemes and whatever else that then with retirement had financial value.
Okay.
We see those setting up the notion of a home office. So you then put your interests into a small investment portfolio, probably mostly supported by a corporate finance person from an audit firm that does your taxes, or through the help of your private banker, or through the help of some or other form of financial institution. Then people develop a portfolio to then keep themselves engaged with markets and the economy. And whatever little proceeds they get from there, then they channel into a foundation as part of that plowback. I've also come across people who, for exactly those 12-hour, 14-hour long days, who have said, I don't want to do anything anymore. All I want to do is give a dividend back to my family. That's the expression I've heard a lot from people. I've not spent quality time with my family, and therefore, if I'm 55, 60, I would like to spend the rest of my time with them. And people then tend to invest that traveling a lot. I have a friend who is a motorcycle Harley Davidson enthusiast. His name shall remain nameless. And he does motorcycle tourism, if I can call it that, wherever, and they do it as a couple. Whenever they are anywhere in the world, you will see them showing some of the most exquisite pictures on motorbikes, Harley Davidsons, doing all manner of things in most interesting spots. Some people develop hobbies like hunting, fishing, things that they didn't really have time for. And then there are those that I've come across that just play golf every day. Some people are having it nice in this life.
Sure. Two of the tenets that really resonate with me of contributive citizenship highlight one's personal mission in how they show up as a parent and how they show up as a partner. And in your article, you talk about recovering lost time. And it resonates deeply with what you've just shared. And what practical advice would you give to leaders seeking to reprioritize relationships and also avoid burnout? How do they cultivate a sustainable balance without sacrificing their well-being or personal fulfillment?
Well, there are many of us that help in that space. So I have tools that I've used with those that have come knocking at my door around our model of purposeful living.
Yes.
I have friends who are industrial psychologists that also help you, because sometimes you may find that there's emotional, let's call it emotional trauma, that a person goes through as they switch into this environment. And perhaps it's a question of you get traumatized by realizing how much harm you've done emotionally to your family. In terms of, even though there's this notion of hunter-gatherer, so perhaps you may have felt you were a hunter as a male and your wife is a gatherer. But actually there are certain sacrifices that they would have had to make to become that stable gatherer. Then you find women who will say, I went to university. I had a career in the first 5 years of my life, and I had to choose between being a dependable mother versus being a successful corporate executive. And maybe we sat down that I will do the base grounding for the children. You go and make sure you earn a living for us. And either way, someone loses touch with something. Most women will say how they find that once their children become adults, only then do they feel now they can really do something for themselves.
Sure.
There's also a sense of, I don't know who I am anymore. Who can help me rediscover myself? So there are clinical psychologists, depending if there are clinical issues, there are industrial psychologists, if it's just purely work-life issues. And then there are programs that these days you can do. I know UCT runs an integrated coaching program for executives. Elsewhere in the world, there are places you can go and do life reorientation programs as couples. So there are many ways that people find that they have to rediscover themselves. So the first thing to do is to identify what the challenge is. Is the challenge merely that, I must tell you something hilarious. I had a friend once who used to be a head of a very important organization. And we had one of these catch-ups, coffee at a place. And he shows up with a pack from a mobile company.
Yes.
And as we says, they says, excuse me, but I've just come from this place. I have to unwrap my phone. And as we sit there, he says, just please remind me, how does one actually activate a SIM card? So I thought he was being funny. But think about it. When you're in a corporation and you're an executive, all that happens, IT brings things to you.
Already done.
IT brings an iPad with a Post-it, and they say that's your username and password. They give you a phone, that's your PIN number. Once in a while they come, can we please take your gadgets? We have to upgrade the security features. They bring it back. Here's your username, whatever. So generally, in the name of corporate security and in the name of making executive life comfortable, convenient, people never have to figure out these things. Except at home, some then, of course, will have youngsters that fidget with their gadgets. And then they have to figure out how to SIM swap and do whatever with their children. But generally, you wouldn't even let your children play with your phone because it's a very important corporate asset.
Correct.
Anti-cyber tracking, anti.
Website configuration.
And so as a result, and you find that you can only do certain things with it because it's a work appliance.
Yes.
Most people I know generally carry 2 cell phones because one can do with what you want, it's yours. The other, you can only do work-related things on it. So there are little transitions like those to major transitions where you find that you are totally lost in terms of life orientation and you need a coach, counselor, advisor, mentor to walk the journey with you. Other instances are where people find that they have been so negligent of themselves, of their sense of well-being, that they've perhaps punished themselves, their bodies. And so you are now an early retiree, you have medical issues, you have more mobility and morbidity issues. And so as a result, you now have to figure out a whole new universe of reorientating your sense of health and wellness.
But it comes across, Ntate Makwana, that you also need to have a sense of humility in engaging in wanting a portfolio life. You have to have the humility, one, to ask for help, but also understand that it's bigger than you. You're not just a one-man island. How do you inculcate that in people that have been executive for 10, 20 years, who then reach out and say, assist me? How do you inculcate it's okay to ask for help?
Well, I guess at that point, people are of advanced age. So there's something called the adult learning process in leadership, where you have to create an environment where the person can mirror themselves in the problem. And as they figure it out through, because it's about self-discovery, as they discover that, so I've been through this, so then they start getting that comfort to ask. But also it's about rapport and trust. You wouldn't just go to anybody and start opening up. So if you are in my position, being the go-to person, you must make sure that people feel you have integrity. People must feel that, you're not going to be broadcasting their challenges in your social and family circle. So there's that sense of needing to be discreet, to be dependable, to be trustworthy on the part of the person that people go to for the advice. The other thing that I would say to peers and colleagues is to also guard against over-advising. Because I might sit here and start sweating and puffing. Maybe it's a symptom that my blood pressure's gone high, and you start telling me, if you drink Coversil and drink this and drink this, you will be.
Yes.
Who says I've got that? Maybe it's something else. I could be a male person going through what women go through in menopause. Apparently, us men now get hot flushes.
Could be the water.
It could be the water. It could be I'm anxious about something. So rather ask questions like what you said earlier. So start off with, are you okay? Is everything fine? And then let them say, no, I don't know. I feel like I've got palpitations. I feel like I've got this. What do you think? Of course, others will just say, just go to your doctor or something. But sometimes we give unsolicited advice, thinking that our experience matches someone else's circumstances. So you must make sure that you work with the person in front of you to figure out what is it that in their context they actually could be seeking support for. There are some you just say to them, once they've confirmed what it is they need, so you just say, well, there's tool X or book X or app X that helps you configure this. And there's more and more of those tools and podcasts that people do on leadership. I've seen one financial institution beginning to invest in balancing financial wellness with personal wellness. So your private banker will have a network of people that financial institution would have had developed an association with, to then sort of refer you.
Yes.
Generally, again, in this area, it's an area where people deal with these challenges through word of mouth. They say in the advisory space, your marketing and advertising poster is the last person you assisted and supported. If they feel they were dealt with respect, integrity, and quality of imparting of knowledge and experience, then they will tell the next person. But if they feel maybe they didn't really get the quality they wanted, they're not necessarily going to be a reference point.
I think transitioning into different spheres and cultivating a portfolio life also exposes you to different perspectives. But I want to hop on contributive citizenship. So a lot of professionals tie a significant part of their identity to their careers, and you've shared on this. But how did this shift reshape your understanding of leadership? What strategies did you use or support executives use to define their purpose or raison d'etre, as you mentioned in your article, so that their sense of identity isn't just closely linked to their career, but other portfolios of their lives?
I think that if I look back at the journey that I traveled, you need to remember, I mean, one of the points that I raise in the article on LinkedIn is that, baby boomers and older Gen Xers used to have something called a Rolodex.
Yes.
You had it on your desk with lots of business cards.
Different
Today,
papers.
all that is on your phone. So you need to constantly look at your networks. Whenever I do public talks on leadership and strategy, I always say to people, you need to almost self-audit your social networks. What's the point of being on LinkedIn and you've got, say, 1,000 connections, and this is a professional network, and the LinkedIn connections you have all have one thing in common. They went to school with you,
Yes.
grew up in the same township, perhaps even went to the same university for undergrad. And even worse, perhaps even worked in the same organization. Generally, people hang out together. You've been in banking, you hang out with people in the sector in the name of it's good for sharing experiences and best practices. So sometimes it can lead you to develop an insular mindset. People are on various platforms like Instagram. I think they misuse the purpose of the whole Instagram. I mean, if you're going to have an Instagram profile and all you're doing with it is showcasing your selfies, it may have certain connotations that you may not be conscious of. Some might look at this and say, well, is this a sense of being self-absorbed? And there is already a perception that certain generations are too absorbed with themselves. Is this a sense of being a vanity case? So all these things require introspection. At the same time, you don't have to be perhaps artificial and appear and want to post and look knowledgeable perhaps more than you really are, because people are going to reply to you and say, I liked what you said about self-determination. Can you tell me more? And then you umming and ahhing,
Yes.
not sure what
because
to
it's
say.
been generated by something else.
So, but the key thing around purposeful living and leading and living purposefully, or leading and living with purpose, my hashtag is live and lead with purpose, is that you've got to have a sense of a balanced intentionality. And so hence we offer the 7 perspectives of have intentionality about you as an individual in the personal perspective. Have intentionality about you as a parent, whether it's mother, father. Have intentionality about you relative to a partner, life partner. Intentionality about community. Have intentionality about spirituality. And then, of course, about work and the economy, and then the sense of lifelong learning. Because often when we talk about being contributive citizens, you think either you're contributing to a corporate citizen, which is a company or formal organization, or maybe you're contributing to a political organization, that's still contributive citizenship, or you're contributing to a country, a nation, through your civil duties, that's still contributive citizenship. But all those are but dimensions of certain aspects of life. The real issue is to figure out how to have this constant balance between the 7 dimensions.
And consistent intentionality, right? But Ntatebakwana, I'd like to challenge and throw the gauntlet back to you, particularly when we talk about the different social media avenues that we have and find ourselves. When people see them, it's also an expression of identity from time to time. And we see how others will use for good and others will use for the bad, especially when it comes to how they contribute. Can it not be said that in many ways people have amassed a sense of identity that is fulfilling for them as they introspect? So in the posting of multiple selfies, it's a sense of here I am confident, I am proud of who I am. And the viewer's perspective is one of, oh, this person is vain. This person posts so many pictures of themselves. Are we not maybe skirting, I don't know, a thin line in that sense?
So ultimately, what you choose to do with that balanced intentionality of living and leading with purpose, it's you have credibility if those that engage with your presence feel that there's authenticity here. This person is authentic, is original. Now, in this environment we're in of burgeoning social media platforms, the problem is that there's escapism on the one hand. So, I mean, it's very easy to cut and paste yourself into a photoshopped picture being on a beach in Maui.
Yes.
Because you want to look like the next person that has just been maybe on holiday in Zanzibar or whatever. And so it's like there's a Me Too thing of conspicuous consumption. More and more you will see on social media, especially on Instagram and Facebook, people stopping at a dealership when someone's car is about to be delivered with bouquets and so on, and very quickly getting in there, taking a selfie to say, hey, I've just bought a car. But actually, they didn't. They just found a gap, took a snapshot, and want to look like they are thriving. And it shows my daughter is studying a postgrad in the area of mental wellness. And often when I talk to her, she tells to me about how a lot of people, young people, struggle with mental wellness because of this meism that is fueled by the need to look on social media like something you're not. And so we're going to find that there will be various pockets. There will be pockets of people that will know how to, it's like alcohol. Supposedly, there's responsible use of alcohol. Supposedly, there are people who know that all you need is a dash of whiskey because your doctor said if you have a dash of whiskey at bedtime, it helps you not to have blood clots. But there are those who don't know how to have that discipline of having a dash of the whiskey. There are those that want to finish the whole bottle. And before they know it, they drown themselves in the bottle.
Yeah.
Social media is as addictive as a drug. And it is as addictive in that way that a lot of people have diminished sense of mental well-being without knowing. If I talk to people who are in this field, they see a lot of cases of people who live with depression without knowing until they crash. Something social happens, and then they realize they don't have social engagement skills. That's why, in my view, and in the work we do in our environment, is to help people balance through the 7 dimensions. Then also to balance with understanding that the universe is cyclical. So there we use a tool called the Human Pin Code. And the Human Pin Code, developed by Douglas Forbes, says that the universe is moved by non-numbers. So for instance, this year's 2025 is a 9-year, it's a year of change. And a lot of people that I've been saying to them 2025, year of change, 9-year, have been saying, now there's a new pope, there's new this, there's Mr. POTUS doing all sorts of things with tariffs. The world is shaking. And largely all this is happening because this is the year that the universe is refreshing, is transforming, is recalibrating for next year when it's a year of new beginnings. And so often you have to, we help people develop a 7-year plan. to really recalibrate their life goals in those 7 dimensions in line with the cycles of the universe.
In your article, you share about weaning off old ideas and highlight the notion of embracing curiosity and risk. Could you share a personal story that illustrates how embracing curiosity or taking a risk has led to growth in your life or has led to other opportunities that weren't necessarily on your roadmap before?
So I've been living a portfolio life since I was 41. When I left, as I think I mentioned it in the article as well, that's how I stumbled onto this notion of a portfolio life. When I first stepped down from being chair of, I guess, the largest corporation on the continent in 2011 after the FIFA World Cup, you then, as an individual, had to step back to say, what next? Is there a next big corporation to lead, or is it going to be the case of leading slightly smaller corporations? And therefore, if you have a highly engaged mind like mine, you want to constantly be engaged with solving complex problems. So a colleague at the time, Dr. Johan Riedlingeys, shared this idea. I took the book. He actually said, here's a copy of mine, you can take a look. And by the time I was done with the first chapter, I thought, no, I need a copy of my own. So I went on to Amazon and downloaded it. I'm not one to lick pages. Some of my colleagues, leaders in our country, I remember spending time with the late Gov, Titombo, we were flying together at Cape Town. So he was busy with this book, and I'm on Kindle on the iPad. He says, hey, Chief, you need to touch and feel the book. So generationally, for me, a digital book is adequate. It's one of those books that I could never put down. And so at the end of it, I then figured out that my portfolio is a pyramid.
Okay.
At the center of the pyramid is my life purpose, which we've shared previously, being trusted counselor to world-class leaders who want to leave the world better than they found it. Then at the base of it is Epitome Investments, our family-owned business, modest, small family office. And then on the left side of the pyramid is leadership advisory work, which is some of the conversations we engaged in these podcasts. And on the right side of the pyramid is then governance, which is the work that one does on boards. And so in that pyramid, overlaying it on the 7 perspectives of how one shows up as a father, as a husband, as a member of a community, as an active member of a spiritual path, as a contributor in the economy, and as an ongoing student of life, then one found that that's how you make it work. So there's more and more tools that are coming up where you can almost do a questionnaire and self-assess to figure out how to plot your pyramid. But there's just plenty of tools that are out there for people to use.
You know, listening to Ntate Makwana, it also is clear that sometimes we look at a portfolio life and automatically think, like I mentioned earlier, it's for seasoned professionals or those who are highly accomplished. But if we look at someone who's listening and who is starting off in their career, and they also want to participate in contributive citizenship and understand what self-mastery and a purpose-driven life would be, how would you encourage them to start in their sphere of influence? If they're saying, well, I haven't amassed as much experience as Ntate Makwana, but I feel the unction to be a contributive citizen outside of the work that I do, what practical steps would you guide them on? Is it seeking counsel? Is it starting by volunteering at your local church? But what viable action should they take?
I think you put your finger on it with the volunteering. Nothing gives you good exposure than volunteering. And generally, if in non-profit spaces, whether it's a church, whether it's a chicken soup, a kitchen soup, whether it's somebody going out to distribute blankets in winter to people who are destitute, a pair of hands that don't seek to be paid is always welcome.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's how you meet people as well. That's how people get to enjoy and experience your energy. And then it's bound to be that at the end of it, someone will say, thank you for coming up. Thank you for helping us. In future, should we need you, would you be available? And if it's a yes, the next thing is, so can we have your numbers? So that's the first step of networking.
Yeah.
The other part is to perhaps read about your area of interest. And again, in the digital space we live in, if you are smart about it, you can publish things in small bits online and do some really wonderful things. There's a young person in Botswana. If my memory serves me well, I think she's from Sorowe, but she's from Botswana. Her name is One Dumela. So when you see her book, you'll think it says one Dumela. It's One Dumela. She gave me a book the other day, a children's book, a storybook. It's like small, 20 pages, but it's beautifully designed with animations and so on. And that's her first step of being a contributive citizen. Her book is sold in most preschools, environments. Some parents use it for storytelling. It's about a young girl from Botswana, the story, who then gets exposed to some really early life stage developments in terms of being shown that she can be whoever she dreams to be.
Yes.
So there are people like One Dumelo that are an example of how you just start small. My own daughter is now doing a similar thing digitally. She's finished her studies. She's sort of stuck in Scotland waiting to graduate. So she decided she's going to use the 2 months of waiting rather than fly back home and fly back there.
Nice.
To do a project. And she seems to be loving it. You will find that as a student on campuses, there will be all manner of social transformation societies you can join.
Yes.
Contribution platforms you can join. My children participated in most of those. So the thing is, just choose your path. And I know as a young person, it's confused. The world is confusing.
Too many options.
Yeah, and also there's too many information, misinformation, disruptors. But just choose your path. I mean, if I look at the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, where I'm a trustee, they have a program called Ifembacha.
Okay.
Hand over the future to the children, Ifembacha. And they have a number of leadership development programs for young people. One of them that is probably most visible because it gets televised is the Children's Parliament, which Madiba started with Mama Grasa. And it's children being inculcated with a sense of social, political contribution and what it would feel like if you served on a committee on this and a committee on that and a committee on that. So there are many ways, and often the English have an expression which sounds dodgy. It says monkey see, monkey do, which is about children emulate what they see in their parents.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you start as a young parent, small as children might be, and you start being seen as being active in various things, when they get to a certain age, because they've seen it as part of how things are done at home, they aspire to do it in their sphere of influence, and therefore that's how they developed a consciousness. The other thing that I used to do when our children were small, younger, we chose to as we could afford a holiday, to be picky about ensuring we choose destinations that are more educational,
Okay.
or both educational and fun.
Yes.
So if going to within means you go to Italy versus going to Mauritius with small children, we would choose to take them to the museums, because then they get to learn about how the world works.
And the exposure of being in a foreign country at that level.
And you broaden their horizons.
Yeah.
But if you just take them, I mean, you could take them to the beach in Durban or Mozambique, wherever local, because at that age, playing with sand and water is just the same. So it doesn't require thousands of an economy class ticket. But if you took them to a place that has got historical meaning, and the museums are well curated, because these days children, when they come back from holiday, they have to tell a holiday story. They then get to start knowing how to have quality conversations at an early age. And so that's an example of contribution as a contributive citizen in the space of how to be a parent, father, mother. Equally, if you look at your extended family, generally, because in society, the successful and prosperous are generally in the top 1%, top 5% of society.
Yes.
People who've graduated, who've got formal economy sort of success. So I remember in our family, we have a family AGM. There's about 100 of us on my mother's side of the family. We started cherry picking among family members to do a talk on New Year's Eve over braai on whatever subject that young people and family members. So we've had family members who are stockbrokers talk to us about markets in a lightweight manner over a New Year's Eve dinner. And I remember I've had to do a talk or two on something. And then once we did an actual family mission, vision, values, but embedded in that was you doing your own charting ahead. I remember there's an exercise where we had to write a letter to ourselves, to our future selves. At that time, it was around 2005-06 when we did this. I was just an ordinary member of the board at ESCOM and so on. And I wrote myself a letter saying, firstly, my future self will make sure that the name Makwana is associated with goodness. That it's not a name that will embarrass its forebearers. And at that time, I had not yet even crystallized my vision and my life purpose as I'm articulating it. But I just said, we'll be a purposeful leader. And the last line was, we'll start being a chair of a medium-sized company. Little did I know that 4 years later, in 2009, I'd find myself being chair and CEO of then ESCOM, being the largest company in the continent. So, but it just shows you that if you appreciate that what you express goes to your lips or from your thoughts into God's ears, if you pray God or Allah or whoever you worship. Some people choose to say the universe. So one of the authors I follow says we're very good at telling God, universe, what we don't want. You know, you'll hear people using the expression, oh, please God, don't let it rain. Or please God, don't let this happen. He says, turn that around. If you're going to say, please God, then say, oh, please God, let it happen. Please, God, let this happen. Recently, I was reading, I just finished a book on, it's called Intentional Focus. And they say, rather than saying, I've got this problem, say, tomorrow I get to solve this problem.
Yes.
Because
have a different,
you get to do something about it. So you empower yourself to know that today I might have this problem, but tomorrow or today later, I get to do something about it.
Wow. As we wrap, Tata Makwana, I'm always left in awe and inspired. But I think as we wrap, the final question I have, again, just on the article that you penned and the importance of having a portfolio life, speaks to what you've shared on an expansive leadership. You talk about challenging the traditional notions of leadership and how this approach emphasizes openness, inclusivity, and adaptivity. How does expansive leadership link to contributive citizenship? And are they different conventional models, or are they synergies that interplay? And why is it important for today's complex world, one, to be a leader that thinks broadly, but still actively contribute towards society?
So the notion of expansive leadership is not my invention. It's the invention of the author of the Portfolio Life. But my hypothesis is that if you are purposeful, if you're balanced with your intentionality, and you're consistent with your intentionality, you will be expansive. Because expansive simply means you will be a champion of growth. Whatever you touch shall expand. You will be expansive. And so in one of the earlier podcasts we spoke about, when I spoke about David Easton and the political system, we are in a universe where you have a constant tussle, almost like a pendulum swing between extraction and contribution. So the people that fund things are constantly driving a certain extraction agenda. They clothe it up nicely in political manifestos that whoever politician that they fund champions, as we're seeing in the Northern Hemisphere. But actually, if you just drill down beneath the aspect and say, but these policies that we hear being espoused, who do they really benefit? Then you get to follow the money and see the extraction agenda. Back to where you asked me about how can young people and other people figure out how to make an ordinary contribution as contributive citizens. I think therein lies the challenge today. People are taking too long compared to a decade or two ago to champion causes they believe in.
Sure.
Largely because there's this huge machinery of information that powerful people own. And as we speak now, someone is busy inventing an image on AI that will counter the message that we're sharing here. And someone is going to read it cold and find themselves disoriented, confused by what is factual, what is infactual. The other day I was watching on one of the social media platforms, an elephant has got a crocodile on its,
instead of the tusk.
Below the tusk. And it's jumping up and down with the crocodile trying to let go. That's not real. There's no elephant that jumps that high. But someone is going to think, he's going to start sharing immediately.
Yes.
Did you see this elephant and the crocodile?
Yes.
And so it's important that people always pause and step. Is what I'm seeing real? Is it factual? Is it authentic? Before you just huff and puff, as people say.
And do your own due diligence.
Absolutely.
I think we live in an age, you shared earlier on, Tate Makwana, we live in an age of disinformation and misinformation.
Absolutely.
So it's important for one to also do that due diligence for themselves.
Yeah.
This is the Contributive Citizenship podcast. We've been in conversation with Tate Makwana. And we're called to reflect on how we contribute to society and how we engage with one another. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Ntate Makwana, for always being so generous with your insights and knowledge. I hope this exploration of contributive citizenship inspires you to consider your role in fostering cooperation and mutual respect in your own communities and contributing to society. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.